What's up? Today I want to talk about knucklehead coworkers. For some reason, I usually tend to get along better with male coworkers than I do with female coworkers, especially when it comes to black people. Not sure why that is, but a lot of women in places that I've worked tend to be very catty and competitive and miserable. But for the most part, the males where I work are pretty chill, and I get along very well with them. Once in a while, there are a few exceptions. Like, for instance, this guy the other day, I generally get along with him, but I can tell he has some issues with women. So this guy comes to me one day while we were working, and he started asking me questions about another co-worker who had just started working there like 2 weeks before. So he asked me if this woman has any children, and I'm like, what are you asking me if she has children for? I don't know. Why don't you go ask her if you want to know? And he kind of just shrugged it off. So ordinarily I wouldn't follow up with any further response. Ordinarily, I wouldn't say much else, but in this case, I told him, I said, dude, if I were you, I would just leave that alone. I don't know what ideas you have going on. I don't know what you got planned, but dude, if I were you, I would just leave that alone, because she told me that her husband works there in another department. And he was like, oh, no, I'm not trying to holler at her or anything. And I was like, yeah, right. And I just went on about my business after that. But knowing what I know about him, I know that he was probably scheming to, at some point, flirt with this woman. Because another coworker, who happens to be a woman, told me that this guy had been harassing her. And when she disclosed this to me, I was like, well, why don't you? I'm not trying to get into your business, but if it's that bad, why don't you file a complaint against this man? Because according to her, she had been telling him to leave her alone, that she wasn't interested in going out on a date. But I guess she didn't want to, for whatever reasons, she didn't want to file a formal complaint against him. So I know that he has a tendency, at least, to flirt with women and to make unwanted advances. Then I had this other coworker, former co-worker, because he's no longer working with the company, to ask me for some money to get snacks from the vending machine. So I'm a person who has a heart, and I'm not stingy for the most part. And I understand some people fall on hard times. You don't know what somebody may be going through in their life, and they may be having some financial difficulties. So he asked me for $1, and at that time I didn't have $1 on me. I had like 50 cents, so I gave it to him. And then he came back to me a few days later asking for more money, and I was like, let's not make this a habit. And I refused to give him the money. And I was like, although I didn't say it to him directly, I was thinking, what the hell do you take me for, man? You think you're a pimp? Shit, you're a grown-ass man. You work just like me. What the hell are you doing with your money? And then I later found out that was something that he did. I wasn't the only person that he asked for money. He asked some of everyone for money. It just made me lose respect for him, because I'm like this. You're a man, and if I were a man, I would kind of feel ashamed to be asking another man, much less a woman, for money. And I'm just like that. I'm a kind of a prideful person. I don't really like asking people for things, even when I should sometimes ask for help. But as time went on, it became evident that this guy had substance abuse problems, or at least some problems with alcoholism, because there were times that he would show up for work reeking of alcohol, And he had a funny scent anyway. I don't know what his deal was, if he didn't take showers, but sometimes his breath would smell like beer and shit. And then sometimes he had this strange body odor to where you could smell alcohol coming out of his pores. And he would also smell like toe jam. One day, he would usually bum rides off of other guys and stuff, off other people that worked there. And I guess one particular day, the person who he usually get a ride with left him. So he asked me for a ride. And I went on ahead and gave it to him, and he had a distance to go. So rather than have the man walk, I gave him a ride. But I was sorry that I did it because, for one, he smelled so bad that the freaking car was stink and funky. The next morning, like 10 o'clock in the morning, when I went back out to the car was still fucking stink. And I had to leave the windows down to get to air the car out and spray Febreze and shit on the seats to get rid of that lingering stank odor. Then when I gave him the ride, he told me he wanted me to drop him off to his house. And as we neared the neighborhood where he lived, instead of him having me drop him off at his house, this guy had me to drop him off in front of a fucking store with, excuse my language, but a bunch of fucking niggas hanging around. And I had never been so scared in my life. I thought that one of those guys was probably going to try to rob me or jack me. But thankfully it didn't go down like that. I just had him to get out of my car real quick. I just hightailed it out of there. And I said to myself, I'd never do that shit again. But to make a long story short, I noticed that after a few months, I didn't see him, and I inquired with another coworker what happened to so-and-so. And the person told me that he was terminated because he didn't show up to work. Someone saw his car in the parking lot, and they sent someone out there to find out what was up. And they found him passed out in the car, drunk. So he was terminated. I don't know, I guess I felt like talking trash about people today. I guess that'll be it for now. Thanks for listening.